We're talking with ex-Michigan resident Cam Holding, who's a member of the San Diego Seals. And my first question to you is kind of going to frame the entire discussion of what we want to talk about. You have flown under the radar for a lot of your life in a variety of positions and end up coming out, and being very successful at some of those things. So my question to you is the quiet entry because of the way you were raised in DeWitt? Was it because it's just the process? Because I think that I really believe that you're an unbelievable player and coach, and I'm not sure you get the accolades sometimes that maybe you deserve.
First off, thanks for that, and thanks for having me here. I would say yes, I love flying under the radar. As you kind of mentioned there, it's kind of how I've gotten to where I am today, and ultimately it stems from things that have been passed down from, people like my dad from coaching. People like, still to this day, Patrick Merrill reinforcing that, if you put your nose down, you work hard, think good things happen. And so I've kind of tried to keep that mentality throughout my career and just, work hard and hope it pays off. And fortunately, it has a lot of time. So very thankful for that.
I thought of a movie title. I said, you could be, if we wrote a movie about you, it could be Rudy with Talent.
That's awesome.
As a part of that. Does Dad play a big part in that process?
Yeah, so ultimately, I started up in Whitby, Ontario when I was 3 years old, and he coached me until I was about 15 years old. And so, he actually also played lacrosse when he was 3 years old, and I think he's 58, and he's still playing for a team in Grand Rapids in the IBLA League. So lacrosse kind of runs in the blood in the Holding family, but he's definitely been, my biggest fan, my biggest supporter, and has pushed me to be who I am today. So,
and just as part of this first question, when did you figure out you could make a living at lacrosse?
Never really thought about it. When I was playing junior A, I was coached by Derek Keenan, who's, one of the all-time greats, both as a player and obviously as a coach GM. And he came up to me one day after practice and said, have you ever considered playing in the National Lacrosse League? And at that point, I was still really tiny. It just had a little bit of a work ethic, a little grinder, and I never really thought about it. And I sat back and I was like, yeah, that's something that interests me. And he ultimately opened that door for me to get drafted in Edmonton. And it was at that point where my love for the game grew even more. And I got cut from Edmonton, but that hunger and that work ethic, it really challenged me. And I made a commitment to myself to get back and make sure that I, did not lose that opportunity again.
Did the business aspect of the sport become important after 2018 and trying out for the Canadian national team and getting hurt and realizing you don't have insurance?
Yeah, that was tough. Thankfully, I have health insurance through,
right.
At that point in time, I was, married to my wife, Paige. So I did have health care, and, ultimately the CLA did help me out. They did help cover some of the expenses. So it was a bit of a process, but that was a little bit of a shocking thing, because those big time injuries, you never really think it's going to be me. And then all of a sudden, boom, it happened, life changed, and you miss out on a season, and all of a sudden things, your whole life just changes. So, and again, have to put my nose down and work hard to battle back and be able to play again a year later. So.
Talking with Cam Holding, a former Michigan resident, Grand Valley, Florida Southern, and this is the Michigan Lacrosse Review. My name is Greg Norman. Welcome to show number 20. We're talking to you in California, San Diego specifically, downtown San Diego specifically. I say that because I lived there for a long time, so we were talking a little bit about different parts of San Diego. And Cam, the easiest thing to start for this conversation is sort of start at the beginning and kind of do some chronological discussion. And for you, it kind of started in DeWitt. I know you grew up in Canada, but you moved to the DeWitt area. And kind of take us from maybe middle school through high school and then into Grand Valley.
Yeah, so we moved to DeWitt, Michigan in 2005. So I was 15 years old. And we actually almost moved to Holt, Michigan. And the reason we almost moved to Holt was because in Lansing, which was where my dad was working at GM, they were kind of like the lacrosse program in Lansing. And so we were really driven to going there so that I could continue playing lacrosse at a high level. We had a really tough time kind of finding a place to live in that community. So we ended up finding a house our family was excited about in DeWitt. So we settled down there, and then we went to school and we're like, all right, there's no lacrosse program. How do we start one? So we met up with a family, the Klisch family, and then my dad, and they ultimately started the program. And I found myself, instead of playing that high level lacrosse, kind of being a teacher or leader, if you will, to others around me and trying to go recruit kids to play this great sport and introduce lacrosse to kids that otherwise haven't seen it. So it was an interesting path through high school. Wasn't playing, like I said, that high level lacrosse, but it was a really cool experience being able to teach this sport to high-end athletes that played basketball, baseball, and football in the U.S. and teach them this new sport of lacrosse. And ultimately, DeWitt is now, a pretty great program. They have a ton of players. I think they start as early as third grade. They have boys, they have girls, and the lacrosse community in Lansing and Michigan as a whole has grown tremendously. And so it was really cool to kind of be a part of that growth in the early stages.
We keep having discussion. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So then after that, I went to college at Grand Valley. I actually went there. I was going to play hockey. So I was going to go play hockey. And the day before the lacrosse tryouts, I had a couple of lacrosse players. I think one actually went to Holt High School. And so he found out who I was and that I was going to Grand Valley. And he messaged me and he said, hey, you want to meet up and just throw the ball around? So I said, sure. And he put on a great sales pitch and I was hooked on the lacrosse team. And so I didn't even go to hockey tryouts and I was just all lacrosse and had a great first run. We went to the national championship our first year, which was really cool for a team that I don't believe at that point they had gotten over 500. We had a pretty cool class, just a good group of people, a great coach in Merle Greer, and a really good experience. And so then I was there for 2 years. So I did my freshman, sophomore year. And then after that, I just honestly got sick and tired of snow. So I went on the NCAA website and I just looked at every single school in the South that did not get snow. Went on a couple of recruiting trips and then I settled on Florida Southern. I had a great visit down there with some guys that I'm still very good friends with today. And I went down there and hung out for a year and got rid of the snow.
Florida Southern, by its own name, should give you some indication that it's a good place.
Exactly. To yeah. And myself and then another DJ or another Michigan resident, DJ Lubes, he's down there now and he's actually coaching at Florida Southern, but he played there. And oddly enough, that's where he and I met, not knowing each other here in Michigan.
There was a bit of a pipeline for kids from Michigan to go to Florida Southern. Were you the first guy to go? And if you were, how did the pipeline get going? Because there's several guys.
I think I might have been the first one to go down to Florida Southern, and that was Coach Rory Whipple was actually down there at the time. So met him. I went down there, and then I came back after 1 year of going to Florida Southern because I was going to go into the NLL draft. So I played another year at Grand Valley. But at the same time, I also started a youth lacrosse program, and so I started Power Play Lacrosse based out of Lansing, and we had a bunch of really talented kids that are from the Midwest that no college coach is going to take a look at that point back in 2010, 2011. So I just jumped on the phone and started giving them a call. And Marty Ward was the assistant coach, who's now the head coach. And he took in a couple players and, ultimately they had the same, that work ethic, that drive that coaches really like and those coachable players. So now I think we have 2 or 3 kids down there right now that are from the Lansing community that started playing with me at Power Play many years ago.
Explain the difference between club lacrosse at Grand Valley and was it NCAA Division 1 at Florida Southern?
It was Division 2.
Division 2?
Yeah, Division 2. And so it's just more, club lacrosse is you have your 2 hours of practice at night and then you can do whatever else, you go to your school. But it was a little bit more laid back. Grand Valley has really upped their game, and now Tim Murray's the head coach there, and he's really transformed that program into something special, and it's a pretty incredible program. But the Division 2, and I'm sure Division 1 is obviously a step above this, but it's wake up, you have lifting, you have class, you have practice, you have film, and it's just a little bit more regimented, and your whole college life revolves around that sport. Where the club lacrosse, you still have a little bit more time to enjoy the social settings that college has to offer.
Grand Valley just announced they're shutting down their second season. They're not going to be playing this next year. And we had a chance to interview Ken Lovick a couple of weeks ago and talk about it. I'm coaching Oakland's club team, and we're trying to figure out, what do you do? And now you've lost a second season. And I think it's going to have, it's obviously not going to bother the NCAA programs, but I think it's going to hurt the club programs, both men and women across the country, pretty dramatically.
Agreed. And correct me if I'm wrong. It's just for out-of-state competition, right?
No. Yes, but Grand Valley said they've shut down. They're not going to have a team in the spring.
Oh,
Tim actually.
Wow. So they can't even compete anywhere. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I was talking to Tim Murray, and I was like, so I mean, one thing here on the SEALs, we work with a bunch of Navy SEALs, and they teach us how to train our mental capacity. And one thing is how to battle adversity and how to overcome adversity. And so I was talking with Tim, and I was telling him, tough news, that sucks, but ultimately you can sit back and dwell on that, or you can you got to find positives and find ways to move forward and move up and have that what's next mentality. And so, I mean, I suggested to him, I was unaware that they couldn't play at all, but I was like, okay, well, maybe you get with Michigan State and Oakland, and you get all these Michigan programs, and you do something interstate. So, I mean, obviously with COVID, everything's kind of evolving and changing, and I'm sure that there's going to have to be some adapting, but hopefully, their program and others in the state can find ways to overcome and find ways to get that competitive fix.
One of the problems that the universities have with it, and they've been really clear, I know this is true at Grand Valley, it's certainly true at Oakland and at Michigan State, that they have an NCAA program to get, sort of prop back up.
Yeah.
And the last thing they need is to worry about club programs, which don't take the security and the process of moving forward. But I think the other part of it is, I think if they come up with vaccines, I think things will change from that standpoint. But in talking to some of these young coaches, it's been interesting. Their hearts are, devastated because they can't play. And I said, it's interesting. I'm 66, and I said I feel bad, but I said I have a lot less seasons left than you do in terms of being a coach. So it becomes even more important to me because I've been coaching for a lot of years.
Yeah.
I said, so you got to find some silver lining in there, because you still have the rest of your life to do other things, but it's devastating nevertheless. And it is what it is. So we'll see. I mean, we may be playing. We'll be playing. We'll see.
I know you were just talking to Brody the other day too, but or I think that was last month. But the same kind of context. People like him and myself. I mean, he's 38. I'm 31. So these are precious years for people like him and me. That are like, okay, we might have a few more years left in the tank. Like, we want to be going. And so, it is a weird dynamic. And like many people, we hope that this is kind of going to end sometime soon.
So if you come back from Florida Southern, you spend some time at Grand Valley, you get drafted. That's your first entry into pro lacrosse. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the summer after I was at Florida Southern, I mean, even while I moved to Michigan, I was still driving. My dad was actually driving me back and forth to play junior A, like 2-3 times a week, like 5-hour drives for one game for a practice. Like, my dad was such a big piece as to the opportunities that I was able to have. But when I came back from Florida Southern, I had started Power Play Lacrosse, so I was running those travel programs. I was driving back and forth to play myself in Toronto. And then, like I said, Coach Keenan kind of gave me that opportunity through the Whitby Junior A program and kind of came up to me and said, hey, have you ever thought about playing pro lacrosse? And I said, no. So then he ended up drafting me in that September to the Edmonton Rush. So kind of low key, he just said, don't worry about going anywhere else. Like, I'll take care of you. I'll draft you. So I said, all right, great. So he drafted me. I went to their training camp, made it to the very last one. Then I got cut. And so ultimately I got cut. I wasn't able to keep playing in the National Lacrosse League. So then I went back and I was able to play at Grand Valley State. Because I hadn't signed that pro card. So that was kind of cool to be able to at least continue playing that one more year at Grand Valley. But I also had a chip on my shoulder because I knew, like, at that point, like, I was so close to getting that ticket into playing pro lacrosse. I was like, man, this is something I really want to do. So I spent that whole year and just, really motivated myself and pushed myself to new limits so that the next year I could get picked up as a free agent and I would make a roster. And thankfully, Steve Gubbett, Bob Hanley, Sean Ferris, and Eddie Como were the coaches at the Colorado Mammoth, Steve being the GM. And they gave me an opportunity and went in and again, all that hard work had paid off and I was able to make that team.
How long were you there?
I was there for, I think, 8 years, 7 years, and one of which I had my torn ACL, so I was not playing. But fantastic organization. I mean, I lived in Colorado for 2 years, and it was just an incredible place to be. The Loud House is what it's called, and it's a loud place to play. It's a great building, good fans, just top-notch organization. So very thankful to be there.
I find it interesting, even in those days when you 14 or 15,000 in the I think the Pepsi Center.
Pepsi Center, yeah. Now it's changed to the Ball Center, I believe. But yes,
you put that many people in a facility, and you still got guys having to take second and third jobs to be able to be pro sports. That doesn't happen in football, basketball, baseball. You get to work at your craft. So I think it would be doubly difficult to be a pro with that kind of hanging over your head.
Yeah, it's really difficult. But again, that tells you how much our players love playing the sport and they love the game. And ultimately they're doing that. And, we all want to see the game grow. We want the NLL to get where the NHL is today, where the NBA is today. And, people like myself and guys that are in the league today, we understand that we have to put that work in today. And honestly, people 30 years ago when the league started, like our president here for the Seals, Steve, I mean, he was playing for far less than what I'm making. Right. But he had the mentality like, hey, we got to do this and we want to see this grow and everybody loves the game and it's got to grow. And so that's just part of this process. And hopefully one year we can look back and be proud of the work that was put in to get us to a higher place.
As an indoor player, does the PLL help that growth, do you think, to some extent?
100%. Any lacrosse is going to help that growth. And I think what the PLL and Paul is doing is fantastic. And they're bringing the game to homes that have never seen the sport before. I mean, they have pretty incredible ratings for their TV ratings. I think they were one of the only ones that had an increase in ratings through the COVID with their PLL bubble. So he's doing some tremendous things and he's doing things differently, which is he's being bold and he's doing things differently. And at times that's a gamble, but ultimately you have to do that for things to pay off and got to disrupt the game a little bit, to possibly see some growth. And I think that's what we're going to find.
I've heard through some interviews that he learned a little bit from the ski community. And in terms of the World Cup, sort of a traveling circus from town to town. And if you go to Europe, they show 100,000 people show up for a downhill race. And it's really revered. It's not so much in America, but it's kind of that you're going from community to community to give them that experience. And there's really no home team. It's right. Just it's individuals. Who do you like? Who gets the most likes on their Facebook pages? And I think it's a novel approach to a sport that can use the publicity.
Yeah, it's a really cool model. It's interesting how they've carried it out, and it's a very well thought out model. And one of the problems with the summer model in years past is that so many of these lacrosse communities sit in snow for 6 months out of the year. And then in the summer, kids have travel across. And so when you have those teams isolated in one location, it's hard to get people to commit to 9, 10 dates in a summer and consistently fill a building where it's a profitable entity. So the ability to go to each location once, people circle that one date on their calendar and you can try to really market to that group for one date. So again, it's different how they're doing it. And I wish them all the best in that.
Where'd you play after Colorado?
So after Colorado, interesting, it's a really odd time in my life when I tore my ACL. So 2 years prior to me tearing my ACL, I started coaching at Michigan State. And I was actually coaching at Michigan State, playing for the Mammoth, and I was flying from Denver to Pittsburgh, Denver to Georgia, and just flying all over the country to coach and play and do all this stuff. But when I tore my ACL, I was like, you know what, I really have a passion for coaching, and I'd like to continue to do that. So I told myself, I'm done playing pro lacrosse. And so when the expansion happened with think it was Philadelphia and the San Diego Seals, you have to protect a certain number of players on your roster. So the GM of the Mammoth at the time was Dan Carey, and he came to me and said, Pat Coyle and Dan Carey, and they were like, hey, we know you're recovering from your ACL. Are you going to play next year? And I said, you know what, guys, like, I'm done. Don't worry about protecting me. I'm going to stop playing. I'm going to focus on coaching. And so they left me unprotected. And after I finished recovery, got through my recovery process, and then, Patrick Merrill was the coach and GM here at the Seals, and he gave me a call, and I talked to him for about 45 minutes, and I told him just this last year, actually, I said, man, when I got off the phone with you, I would have done anything for you. Like, I would have run through a wall for you. And so I just found this new love and this new passion, and I was all in. Like, I was just all in for the San Diego Seals. And so they ended up signing me as a free agent. So interesting dynamic is how that whole little process happened. But ultimately, it was one conversation that shifted my gears and got me back playing again. And now this is going to be my third season here with the Seals.
I want to come back to San Diego, because I know you're an associate captain there as part of that program. I want to come back to that. But let's just back up a little bit and talk a little bit about Michigan State. And all your traveling, I have a personal note that I was coming off the field at Michigan State as a women's coach, as you guys usually were coming on, and I would see you running half the time from the car to get to practice. So I get that premise, but
yeah,
you in a very short order, you had your first year, I think you were 11-5, and I believe you were 18-1 second year.
18-1. I don't like that one, but I'll take the end result over that loss. So
You won their only national championship.
Yeah.
What is it? There's guys before you. Matt Holtz was there for a long time. Matt had been a Division I coach at UAD. There had been other guys that were good. What is it that changed in those 2 or 3 years to make it work?
So when I sat back and looked at that, I really I wanted to change the culture. And essentially, I think that myself being a young person, a young player, and still in the game, you're coaching, again, this is that club dynamic. You're coaching a group of kids that went to go, they're paying a lot of money to play lacrosse. And so you can't make them do 6-7 hours of lacrosse a day. You've got to find that balance. And I feel like I was able to do a good job at finding that balance for that group of players and be able to manage that difference of, like, how much can you really push these kids before they say, this isn't for me. I'd rather just go party or do whatever else it is that they do. And so I think that we did a good job at changing that culture and bringing in players that understood that culture and that work ethic. And I know my first fall, we had a bunch of kids quit because they didn't like the culture that we were creating, and it was changing that culture. And the ones that stayed, I told them multiple times, I'm like, listen, if you guys, the ones that want to win, this is the culture that needs to be established and changed in order to win. So if you really do want to win, stick it out. It's going to be worth it. And, ultimately the seniors that graduated the year that we won, they'll tell you it was worth every second of it.
You played NCAA, you played club, you played pro. I'm a believer that the club model is so unique in its approach that we get caught up in, and a lot of times it's not successful because you think you're applying high school or college type coaching rules when it's when the inmates run the asylum, it changes the dynamic. And if you don't change with that, I don't think you're successful. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, you have to be able to see their side of it and be able to work with them. Like you said, they're basically running the program, running the team, and you just got to find that balance and manage the personnel that you have.
You get 50 guys on the team, and the last 20 guys on the bench never get in the game. So they all decide the next year they're going to get rid of you because they're going to get rid of the best players because they're paying the same as the guys that are playing. That takes
100%.
Takes a special effort.
But again, yeah, exactly. And again, if you create the right culture and you make that number 50 feel as important as number 1 and as big a part of your team and your organization as that first person on your depth chart, that's a culture that you want to create, and that's a culture that players will buy into. And ultimately, I think that breeds success.
Having grown up in DeWitt, not growing up, but having spent your high school years in DeWitt, was that a little little bit of an extra bump that it was your hometown team?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. Everything's green and white over in DeWitt and in Lansing. So it was really cool to do that. And it was for full circle. I'll back up and give some credit here to a kid that I was a junior at DeWitt, and I met this kid. His name was Mark Tratt, and he really liked lacrosse. Just started picking up the game, and I said, "Listen, man, like if you really want to, keep getting better, like I go to the gym every morning. Meet me here, work out with me." And then he came to all my camps and clinics, and ultimately he started coaching for me at Power Play, and then he started playing at Michigan State. And he was the one that actually brought me in to Michigan State to start coaching that group. So it was kind of fun to see how somebody I introduced or helped introduce the game to at an early age ultimately brought me back to give back to a program that he was so invested in.
I'm a Spartan by trade. I grew up there, graduated there. Coming back and coaching was a thrill. And I was driving, I think, 85 miles one way every night to come back to coach. So how much your dad being able to do things. I was doing that when I was in my late 50s and my 60s. And so my question is, I know I'm a compulsive person, obsessive compulsive. Would you put yourself in the same category the way you approach things?
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, you just said you're driving 85 miles. My wife and I lived on the west side of Grand Rapids. So every single night, we have the beautiful time slots at Duffy Fieldhouse from 10 to midnight. And I was driving at 8:30, getting to practice, getting home at 1:30 in the middle of February. Like, I mean, yeah, you love the game, you want to give back. And again, that's dedication that our players could see that just kind of reinforced that culture that we were creating. So.
As you were going west on 96, I was going east on 96, and I could tell you a few nights.
Exactly.
There were a number of nights that I was sure I was going to write my resignation by the time I got home. Unfortunately, I got up the next day and you go again. It was a great experience, and I think the contingent that is still hoping for an NCAA team at Michigan State when you won the national championship, and including even on the girls' side of it. The fun part of coaching there when you were a coach there is that there was such a camaraderie of being able to have a good program in both cases. And that in my tenure there wasn't always the case. So let me just say thanks for being a good guy, because I think we're somewhat compatible with trying to at least make sure it worked for both of us. So that was pretty
good. Of course we were. It was great. It was a lot of fun working together.
That process now let's go all the way back to San Diego. So you kind of hang out, you win the championship, and sort of this road of, less taken. You go to San Diego, and I think you're home now. Is that a pretty fair statement?
Yeah, I think we're home. I mean, my wife, she started working out here. We've got our place, and I am working for the team, playing for the team once that kicks back up again. So yeah, right now this is definitely home.
Now, you went there as a free agent?
Came here as a free agent.
Now you're working for the team. You're an assistant captain. So it kind of goes back to our original premise that you kind of come in under the radar and kind of follow it through. And talking with Brody, if you're not the most liked guy in the locker room, you're certainly one of the top three. And that's a compliment to you. Not that you're not a great guy, because you are, but to come in as a free agent, that takes, to be an assistant captain, that takes some work. Yeah,
it takes some work. But like I said, my belief is if you put your nose down and you put in the work, it'll pay off. And, I always preach to our younger kids, focus, communication, and work ethic. And I think those are three controllables that I identify in my personal game and, life or day to day. And if you can focus and control those things, then good things will happen.
If you look behind you, you can see this full arena. I've been in that arena. I lived in San Diego for about 12, 13, 14 years.
Yeah.
Talk about the Seals, and here's my specific question. The San Diego Gulls had an unbelievable Western League Hockey League franchise there for years, and I'm going back to the 40s.
Yeah.
It seems like that base, even though we're talking about a beach community, that base is still there because your place is packed almost every night.
Yeah, we do a great job, and I think from the top down, our ownership group and Joe Ty, and then obviously our president with Steve Govett and our VP Josh Gross, like they get it and they care and they do things the right way. And aside from doing things the right way, we have not only invested in our team, but we've invested in the community. And the things that we do in the community ultimately pay off, when we have people in the stands. And through this whole through all of the things we've dealt with COVID, our team has been present in the marketplace. We've had players assisting. We've donated free meals. We've donated PPE, and that comes with great ownership and people that care about the community that you're involved in. And so I'm really proud to be a part of this organization and to be able to do things like that for the community of San Diego.
I think that the fan base, which has been there an awful long time, happens also to do with the fact there's a lot of guys from back east that had those backgrounds. I think you find that in California, that not everybody's from San Diego. So
right, a lot of transplants here. Yeah,
you have a bigger process to draw from, and I think that's
agreed.
Huge. Is this hopefully your last stop?
I sure as heck hope this is my last stop. I don't plan on going anywhere else. So again, that's on me. You talk to somebody like Brody, and he's 38, and I hope that I can take care of my body half as good as him so that I can keep playing a few more years. So I would love for this to be my last stop. It's just going to be up to me to keep my body in shape and keep my game at the top.
Having mentioned him, I'm just curious. Something popped in my head. When I talked to Brody, he's obviously a long stick on the field. I asked him if his short stick experience made him a better long stick, and he said, of course. Do you notice he's a short stick as a converted long pole, or do you just know he's just a hell of a player, one of the best that's ever touched the stick?
No, he's one of the best that's ever played, and that's an on the field, off the field. I mean, that guy's leadership skills are top notch, and I first met him with Team Canada, and I met Jeff Snyder there as well. And before meeting Jeff at Team Canada and Brody at Team Canada, those are two guys that, they're big, tough guys in our league, especially Jeff. And to be able to meet them off the field, like, they're just character people. They're good people. They're good-hearted individuals. And again, they share that same passion and that work ethic that has made them so successful on the field. But yeah, I mean, Brody, just all around, he's just an incredible player. Long stick, short stick, it doesn't matter for that guy. You guys see what he does in the PLL, what he does in the NLL. He's an incredible player.
One of the other questions I've asked these guys who've had the opportunity to play for their colors, for their national team, you had a chance to wear the maple leaf. Just is it different?
Yeah, it was one of the coolest experiences of my life. Obviously, winning gold in 2014 in Denver, where I was living at the time with the Mammoth, and I was playing for the Outlaws as well. That was just an incredible experience. And honestly, it's one I almost didn't even go to the tryouts. I was like, I don't even know if I have a shot in hell of making it, because, again, I was the fly under the radar guy. And I went to tryouts, and I just said, I'm just going to outwork people. And I think ultimately you'd have to talk to Randy Mearns, but I'm pretty sure that's ultimately what got me on the spot there and got me on that roster. It was just a relentless work ethic and the ability to say, I mean, he said, hey, would you be down to play long pole? Yes. And so I would encourage young players, take up every position you can, because you never know when, if that question's asked, you want to be able to say yes, 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 and be as versatile as possible.
Jeff mentioned when the first time he pulled on a Canadian jersey, he said he had to sit for a couple seconds. And it's just also true of a couple of American guys I've talked to. It was just one of those, now we have Olympics for lacrosse, then you didn't. So it's a little bit different. You don't often get a chance to play for your country. And he said he had to kind of sit there for a couple seconds and realize this wasn't Barnaby, or it wasn't Calgary. It was for Canada. And he said it was a different experience. He said there's nothing could compare.
Nothing at all. It's you gotta pinch yourself, and I mean, again, as young players, it's something that, I mean, Jeff actually played in 2006. I think that was his first run in the Worlds when the Canadians won, and I was watching him as a kid, and so that's something you go to as a kid, and you just look up to these guys, and that is like the highest level. And so yeah, he's exactly right. The first time you put on that jersey, and I remember sitting in Michigan, and we got the mail came the one day, and it was all of our gear, and that was like the coolest experience ever, to see all of this incredible gear with the maple leaf on it and Canada written across it. So really special for sure.
I had my Canadian hat on yesterday. I was in London for the 2006 championships, and on the sidelines, and it was kind of funny. He had mentioned a story when Dave Huntley had come to him about who he wanted to maybe vote. He had just come out of Denver, and he talked about who was going to be the captains of the Canadian national team. And he said, well, I don't know many guys here, and I don't really have an understanding. But he says, I think Brody's pretty good. Mentioned a couple other guys. And Dave Huntley looked at him. He said, Gary Gait and Tom Marichek are on this team. and they've been around a little bit. And he said, well, I know they're pretty good players, but he says, I don't know a lot about their background. And
Yeah.
Hunley said, well, you're not voting for the guys you just nominated. You're going to vote for the guys that deserve to be here so I just thought that was a
Right.
cute story from him.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
So what's doing besides the Seals in San Diego? You're also involved. Did you transfer your Midwest travel program out west?
Nope. So I stopped running the Midwest travel program, and we are now launching the part of my project here is I'm working on the Junior Seals. So I'm bringing youth box lacrosse to the San Diego community. I just started last month, so we've got about 75 kids now that are running. Right now, we're going twice a week, and we've got a couple tournaments, hopefully in December. So just trying to grow the box lacrosse game, and I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. Any kid that plays box for the first time and they play that real box lacrosse, it's addicting, and kids want more of it. And so that's what we're going to continue to provide.
In a warm weather area like San Diego, you could put boards up and it could be much more sustainable than it might be here in terms of cold weather, because obviously if it's cold, they're going to put ice on the surface and away we go.
Right.
Let me ask you a question. We want as much opportunity to play lacrosse. I'm not sure that Americans who are teaching box, who probably never played box, are really teaching field inside a box. What would you recommend for somebody that was looking as a coach to be able to, because they're different games. Would you agree?
100% different games.
And if you're teaching small ball in terms of what box is, it's a different process. And I kind of wonder with a lot of kids here in Michigan who are playing box being taught by field guys, I just sometimes cringe watching it. It isn't the same sport. I appreciate that they're coaching it. It's a great opportunity. But what could they do? What would be your suggestion to maybe make Americans more understanding of the box game that maybe they're not? And
for sure.
I think that's a fair
point. I think first off, it's a great thing that the box game is growing, and it's a great thing that a lot of these club programs are offering box opportunities. A couple things would be, because a lot of times when you're watching videos and stuff, you see basically what looks like field lacrosse being played indoors. Yeah, right. And again, that's a growing pain, and I think over time that will kind of resolve itself as more people start learning the correct way. I would say for those coaches to reach out to people like myself, like Wes Berg, and other players that are in the NLL that would be more than happy to share resources on how to continue to teach the right way. Because the reality is, just like in field lacrosse, there's little nuances to the box game that I'm able to teach that an American might not be able to. Little tiny things that make the world of difference. And frankly, I'm still learning. Like when Bergie and I are out coaching our junior SEALs, I go and I listen to the stuff that he's talking about on offense, because there's little things that he knows that I don't. Yeah. And we both played the game our entire life. So it'd be the exact same as me going out or somebody who's only done box their entire life teaching field. And a field coach would be like, hey, like I would do little things differently because this is how this is done, It's but I would say use current players as resources and watch film, watch a ton of game film.
It's more than a two-man game.
Yeah, box, I break it down for people. And when I start, so we have a group that's like 6, 7, and 8-year-olds. And I tell their parents, I'm like, listen, your kids don't need to be running around doing all kinds of, they need to be passing and catching. And box lacrosse is all about the fundamentals of this game and repetitions. And our president, Steve Govett, has a pretty funny quote that he says, and he goes, Americans are more athletic than Canadians, and Canadians have better stick skills because when an American is playing catch with a partner, they miss the ball, they have to run and pick up the ball. But the Canadian, if he misses the ball hits the boards, it comes back in a stick, and it's back in the air before the American even gets to his other ball. So I think that's just so funny. And when you watch, the Iroquois national team or the Canadian national team, you can just tell their stick work is far and above, better than any of the other countries that participate. And so that would be my biggest word of advice is telling parents and coaches that fundamentals are key, especially at a young age, so that when they do get to be, high school, varsity, you can actually coach them.
And talk briefly about goalies, because goalie skills in box don't transfer to goalie skills in the field. Not even close.
No, although you might have to get Dylan Ward on to talk to him about that. I would agree with you completely, but somehow he manages to kill it at both positions.
I think I was a goaltender growing up, and you were the fat kid when you were 7. And they stuck you in the net because you were the fat kid and the slowest kid on the team in the area in your neighborhood.
Yep.
Spent all that time on pond ice. Now you're 14 playing mites, midgets, and all of a sudden you've had all this extra ice time. You turn out to be the best skater on the team because you finally grew into whatever it was.
Yeah.
That works for hockey. It doesn't necessarily work for lacrosse because we put kids in nets around here in terms of field because, well, we'll just put – to me, the best athlete, sometimes the best athlete on the field should either be an LSM or a goalie.
Yeah, well said.
And I believe that you can't put a goalie in place if he doesn't really understand what's, projectiles coming at him.
Yep.
And I think we make the mistake. Even in box, you got a lot of equipment on, but sometimes you put kids in net because, well, it's the slowest kid, and I think you do a disservice to the kids. It's sort of right field in baseball. That
yeah,
coach.
It's a weird position. It's a funny story. I coach this kid named Carter Sherman. I think he's actually a senior at Lowell High School, and he came to try out for us, and he was a goalie, and he wasn't very good. He had just started playing, and I was shooting, and he wasn't making saves. So I sat back, and I was like, okay, I mean, he's going for the ball. He just started, so I started throwing the ball right at him. I just kept firing the ball right at him, and he would just soak it. And I threw a couple at his head and even just hit it with his head. And I'm like, okay, well, that's how you be a goalie. You're fearless. And if you're not afraid of the ball, we can coach you, we can teach you. And that kid transitioned in 2 years to like a phenomenal goalie. But yeah, you got to be fearless, and you got to be able to step in front of the ball and not be scared. Which takes a rare breed. I'll say that. I said it takes a rare breed to do that.
Yeah. I had a kid at once that he was an 8th grader, and they'd shoot and the ball hit him in the head, and his defenseman would say, drop, and he would drop 3 or 4 times like this through our tryouts. And what is this deal? Walk up to the kid, takes his helmet off. He's got really thick glasses. So I started asking the kid, and he says, well, coach, he says, I'm legally blind.
Oh my gosh.
Excuse me? He says, I'm legally blind. He says, what I do, he says, I stop the ball. I said, well, making a save isn't being hit with the ball. It doesn't really constitute a save. And his mom had put him in because they had put him in the year before because he was the biggest kid in the class.
Yeah.
And I said, I think we need to find a better sport for you because this doesn't necessarily work. Try to explain to the mom that in the league you're playing on, they were using small little rubber balls and tennis balls. Yeah. Up here, it's going to get, a little more just without switching subjects. You live in San Diego. You've been there 2 or 3 years. You bought a house. Maybe talk briefly about how much of a hotbed San Diego's become since it got going in the 80s. Now you're 40 years out, 45 years out. I'm going to talk to Rob Pinnell tomorrow. We're going to talk about Long Island attackmen. Yeah. It's kind of a separate kind of breed. It's like a Canadian guy coming down and playing on field. But San Diego has become a serious hotbed for maybe some of the best lacrosse in the country.
Yeah, and part of that is because in the middle of February, you've got kids that are still outside. They have their net in their yard, and they're able to play. And like I said earlier, if you give a kid a stick at a young age and a ball, I mean, the way that their minds work, they're going to fall in love with the sport. They're going to become addicted, and you're always learning something. You can sit by yourself and throw the ball in the air, try to balance it on the side, but there's so many different things that you can do, and kids just love it, and they become addicted to it. And additionally, there's also a lot of really talented lacrosse players, PLL, MLL, NLL guys that live down here and are coaching and offering that high level of coaching. There's also a lot of players that played, D1 back in the 90s and in the 80s that have lived here. So you have that grassroots, and you have these people that have moved and transplanted to the community that have that lacrosse background that are continuing to spread the game at the youth level.
It's a great place to live, certainly. And I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to have a conversation with us. It's been fun watching your progress, and well-deserved, to say the least.
Thank you.
And we wish you the best of luck out there. You brought the Spartans a championship. So as a green and white guy, I can say thanks for that as well. So other than that, best of luck in San Diego, and we appreciate your time talking to us.
Thank you very much, Greg. Appreciate it. And as I said earlier, too, for anybody who might be listening, if you're interested in learning more about the box game, just reach out. Especially, programs in Michigan, reach out. Would love to see the game continue to grow in that state, and obviously the country. But use lacrosse players that are at the top as resources because they're always willing to give back.
Thanks, Cam.